Hey guys, Bicebump here, bringing you another Unholy Death Knight video for Dragonflight. Today we're talking about Power Infusion and how it's so incredibly good for Unholy Death Knight. Hopefully, you'll be able to send your raid leader to this video and they will understand why they should give it to you, assign it to you, because Jesus, it does help so much. If you have not seen The Sims, it adds a 12% overall, like in a 5-minute fight, to our DPS, right? In Biscare, that's like 10k DPS or 3 million damage over the entire fight, and most of that is in the opener. So like just pressing Power Infusion is like a 2 million damage button for Unholy. It's really, really good. And it's so good that even though we want it at pool and at 3 minutes, it's still better than any other class out there. Like, it's cool in its 2 minutes, right? But holding it for the 3 minute see the window, the whole DK is very much worthwhile and should generally be done actually. Now, why is it so incredibly good? Let's take a deep dive into Unholy Death Knight and why it scales so well with Power Infusion. First of all, we have extremely concentrated damage windows, right? Our opener in a 5-minute fight could account for up to 30% of our overall DPS, even though its duration is just 10% of the overall time, right? It's incredibly concentrated, so anything that increases the damage of that window will do very well. And Power Infusion does that because most of our burst damage scales very well with Haste, right? We have obviously all our normal buttons, we can press them a bit more quicker. Not entirely true, because when we go above 100% Haste, the GCD doesn't scale any further, but our minions all scale with Haste, will attack quicker, their energy will regenerate quicker. So essentially, if you add 20% Haste, that's essentially 20% more damage to Apocalypse Ghoul, Army, and Gargoyle as well. The only thing that kind of doesn't scale with Haste, as I said, is the GCD if you go above 100%, and it's our dots that always just tick at a constant rate. But most other things do scale. Now, I think we need to dig a little bit deeper into Gargoyle, because it's special in a way, because it scales not linearly with Haste, it scales quadratically. And to understand that, I created some graphs up there that we can have a look at, like the damage profile and talk about how Haste affects it and why it's so very good. So normally, this is kind of like how damage looks like from your Gargoyle, right? It has, it sends casts over time, and the damage of those casts increases as we use death calls to buff it, yeah? And generally, just to simplify it, I've created this graph so that, after every cast we use one death call, right? Increasing its damage, and then another cast, and so on, yeah? Now, let's take a look at what happens when we increase the haste here. So, we get more casts, because the cast time of Gargoyle decreases. And furthermore, we also get more death calls, which will increase the damage of each cast, right? And these two scale in the same way. So here is another graph which kind of shows you, all right, what does the damage profile looks like when we've increased the haste? You can see that essentially add bars to the right, which are all greater than the ones before it. The total damage here is going to be the integral across this time window, and you can see that the damage increases linearly, which means that the integral is going to be quadratic, right? We essentially have two effects multiplying. We have that the damage increases because we can send more death calls, and the number of casts also increase, and these two multiply together and we get this quadratic scaling. Now, it doesn't scale infinitely with quadratic scaling, right? What happens is that when you go above 100% haste, the number of death calls you would cast doesn't increase, because the GCD locks out. Essentially, you can only reduce it to 0.75 seconds, sorry. And after that point, getting more haste doesn't increase the number of death call procs. So you can see here's the final one. What effectively happens is that you get more Gargoyle casts, but the damage increase doesn't scale as well. So essentially the gradient of this graph stays constant, whereas previously it would steepen. And this means that after 100% haste, it scales linearly. Yeah. Still, putting all this together, Gargoyle just scales incredibly well with Haste and is a big reason why Power Infusion is so strong on us. This also means that we get this Haste breakpoint behavior. So Gargoyle, right, when we increase the Haste, its cast time goes down, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that it gets an extra cast. So let's say it gets 5 cast, we need to get above a specific threshold before we can fit that 6th cast in there, yeah? And getting above that threshold is what gives rise to these Haste breakpoints. Essentially, every 9% Haste, Gargoyle will add an extra cast to it. This doesn't necessarily mean that we aim for getting like 18% Haste specifically, because in the opener, right, you got Bloodlust, you got Empowering Weapon, Unholy Assault, PI, Berserking. There's so much stuff being added on top of each other that there's no specific number to aim for in that sense. Also, like your second window would have another point. So what happens is that you just kind of sim your character. It will tell you that Haste is good because we scale very well Haste, and then you can just go for that number. There's no reason to kind of aim for a specific percentage in Haste. Now, I think that's everything I want to say about Gargoyle, Haste, and PI. Hopefully, it helped you understand it a little bit better. As I said, if your raid leader is doubting whether or not they should send PI on you, do send them over here, and I'll tell you that it's a 12% upgrade, and it's much, much better than any other class out there. Leave a comment down below. Do you like PI? Do you like how it affects our DPS? Upvote, downvote, depending on what you thought about this video. Do consider subscribing, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you, and bye-bye.